This is a deeper listen from KEXP. I'm Emily Fox, and before we get into this week's episode, I have an announcement. After hundreds of episodes, first as a Sound and Vision podcast and now as a deeper listen, this feed is coming to an end in mid-February. Our archive of past episodes will still live on. The final KEXP radio show, Sound and Vision, that airs everything you hear on this podcast, is happening Saturday, January 10th. The following Saturday, on January 17th, KEXP's global Indigenous music show, Sounds of Survivance, will be moving to Sound and Vision's time slot on Saturdays from 7 to 9 a.m. Pacific. I am personally passionate about Indigenous stories, history, and issues, so if there was ever a show to replace mine, I'm glad this is it. To honor this shift in programming, today I want to share an interview with Sounds of Survivance co-host Kevin Sur. We talked about how Native Americans and Pacific Islanders have been huge influences in the genres of rock, jazz, and blues. Before we got into the history of who influenced what genre, I wanted to get into why we don't recognize some of these influential folks as Native. People including Jimi Hendrix, Thelonious Monk, Duke Ellington, Dizzy Gillespie, and Charlie Patton all had Native American lineage. I first asked Kevin if he would talk about the history behind why a lot of these artists' Indigenous heritage was not widely recognized.
I think one of the reasons why it's not recognized widely is because, like the development of America itself, there are so many different pathways as to why someone may not be acknowledged as being Native, but it's also many pathways as to why someone, like for generations, would hide their Native identity out of safety. If you can basically pass for anything else outside of the reservation per se, you would. And you wouldn't tell people that you were Native. You know, just going back a couple generations, there were times where it was literally legal to hunt Native people on both the Mexican and the American side of the border, to like stories like Link Ray, who's like, you know, who had memories of hiding from the KKK under his bed, and just rampant racism, which gets very complicated, especially with like Afro-Indigenous people, like those artists you mentioned, where there are times where the government, if someone was like, say, Choctaw and also Black, like the government would times deny them identifying as Choctaw so that they wouldn't, you know, when the reservations were developed, that was like one less person that would get any kind of rights there.
Any land, yeah.
Any land or any sort of provision, which also gets into like things of food and rations and stuff that were provided during certain eras. So, and then the anti-Blackness that existed in America as a whole, like it kind of permeated everywhere. And so the complications of that lead to like an indefinite number of different stories. There's no like one story to tell why do we not remember Duke Ellington as a Native American when he's Black and Native American, or why is that different for, you know, say Jimi Hendrix, who actually like was proudly talking about, you know, being Cherokee. There's a really wonderful interview from one of the artists I play the most on Sound Survivance. They're a Muskogee rap duo called Throne.
Indigenous knowledge, so much shit I couldn't see in the business of chasing civilization. Turns out I had stumbled upon decolonization. And
they've been getting a lot of attention from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and they had a crew come out and do a little mini documentary on them out in Oklahoma. And Yahega, who's the Muskogee member of this duo, was asked, like, what does it feel like being an Indigenous artist in America today? And she said, I feel like we're the first generation of artists who are not invisible. Mm-hmm. It's so true. And I think that for Native people, there was a lack of, there was a lot of hiding your identity, but also at the same time, like we experienced the cultural genocide where nearly every place that mostly Europe overthrew and took from Native people, there was also a systemic process of trying to destroy culture. Just, you know, making it against the law to perform any of your dance hula in Hawaii or doing any kind of dance in Native American traditions, playing the powwow drum, but also like stealing generations of children and sending them to schools to basically try to assimilate them to act and be white. And so this renaissance that has been happening for, the last few decades has really been about Native people from, everywhere from Indigenous Australians, Aotearoa, throughout Oceania, and Native American all the way down south, everywhere. It's this common thread of reconciliation, but reconnecting with your ancestors by relearning the practices from the handful of people that had it handed down to them. And so that process of cultural genocide really also disconnected Native people from understanding who their ancestors were and wearing their Native identity on their sleeve as well.
Yeah, I remember the first time that I learned that it was like illegal to practice, religion, music among Native American communities because of this religious crimes code of 1883, which was in effect. So like that's where the Native American drum went away. It had to be hidden. You couldn't play it. So from like 1883 until into the 1920s, so for decades, that really blew my mind when I first learned about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and anywhere that was colonized, there's the same story, the same exact process. Indigenous people are America. If we're talking about American music, there is not a facet of what anyone would call American music that Native people didn't have a profound influence on helping shape.
Well, let's talk about some of the Indigenous figures who helped create rock, blues, and jazz. And let's start with jazz. So Mildred Bailey, who was very influential in the jazz world. And her mom is actually from the Coeur d'Alene Reservation near Spokane.
You took the part that once was my heart. So why not take all of me?
Tell me more about Mildred Bailey.
Mildred Bailey was a jazz singer who obviously was one of the most influential singers in jazz. And I think one of the most notable things that really got fine-tuned with Billie Holiday was just this kind of singing kind of before the beat and just a little bit after, and just kind of that swing sense of cadence that was just really sparked kind of an emotional response in listeners. And Billie Holiday often considered Mildred Bailey to be a big influence, who's one of the first prolifically recorded jazz singers. But yeah, she hid her identity quite well. But she was a seminal figure in jazz singing and really influenced, all those who kind of came after, including like the great Billie Holiday. So yeah, and a lot of people only until recently didn't know that Mildred was Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah, also influential to Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra. Mildred Bailey was the first female big band singer, which I also thought was interesting. Yeah.
Very cool.
What do I care how much it may storm? I've got my love to keep me warm.
So let's move on to the blues. So first, I think we need to start with you telling the story of Hawaii's Joseph Kekuku and the slide steel guitar.
Yeah, and I did an entire episode on the Roadhouse where I tried my best to tell this history. I called it Native Roots. But it was how this young kid, his name's Joseph Kekuku, he was 11 years old. And like many Hawaiians, he played guitar, slack key guitar. Portuguese instrument brought to the islands by Mexican cowboys, basically, and the kind of the paniolos, the Hawaiian cowboys, like learned from them and developed their own slack key style of playing. So this 11-year-old kid who was walking down a railroad track one day found a loose railroad spike. And the story he told was that he dropped the spike on the strings of his guitar on accident, and it made a sound. And he became quickly obsessed with this sound, and he started playing with this metal spike on the strings. And then he went to Kamehameha schools, where he was a student, and used the wood shop or their machine shop to basically grind down this railroad spike. And he ended up creating the first steel slide. and over the years would reshape and rebuild his guitar to like bring the bridge higher, to do all these, and within just a few years created this what we know as the steel guitar, or the pedal, what would become the lap steel, the pedal steel, and an entirely new way of playing the guitar, which is kind of synonymous with Hawaiian music. But what people don't realize, because it was kind of before the recorded era, was that this new technology that he created and this new form of music that he taught, Kamehameha schools a lot had him make a curriculum so this could be taught to their students. This was the most popular genre of music in the early 1900s. There's so many accounts of how these Hawaiian artists would barnstorm the world, and that was one of the few ways after the overthrow that they could make a living. And the impact it had, not just on on blues, but country music. It changed what country folk. It put the swing and the twang in country, but it also put the slide and the steel in the blues, which would become the Delta blues. And to kind of fast forward a lot, the reasons why that happened is the Hawaiian artists, as they were touring America, when they would go through the South and the segregated South, they would board with the black families there and the black musicians. And so they would share how they played, and the black musicians would pick it up. And the process of literally playing with the steel slide with your hand kind of draped over the guitar instead of underneath the neck, they literally called that Hawaiian style. And there's a really great book called Kikakila, and there's also like a PBS documentary that actually came out just a few months ago, PBS Hawaii, that tells the story, but how that informed the technique and the style that would become the Delta blues. Now, like, how they played the guitar was very much informed by Native Hawaiians. What they played was informed by themselves. So Hawaiians were playing in kind of an open tuning. So if you just didn't touch the guitar and you played the strings, it would make a major chord. And what the blues players were able to do was to adjust this technique to standard tuning, to play to like the blues scale. And that's really where it just took off. And Charlie Patton was kind of a seminal figure in all of that, Charlie Patton's students who include like Son House, I can't even... Howlin' Wolf. But they would just talk about, it's like this is Hawaiian style, like the way that this was done. And so, that's how that style of slide guitar and steel guitar developed in the South.
I wanna wait to what I know. I want enough, but I won't be alone.
So Charlie Patton, he's claimed as, one of the pioneers of blues music, and he has Indigenous roots. Tell me more about Charlie Patton, his life and influence.
Yeah, Charlie Patton was very much a Creole person, per se, technically. Like he was either Cherokee or Choctaw. Like, it's widely believed that he was Choctaw. And he was black. He was also part European. But he grew up kind of on plantations. And when he learned to play guitar, I think one of the things that people don't acknowledge or recognize, and I think that this is kind of a deeper discussion, is that the blues scale, if you listen to powwow singers, you listen to powwow drum, and most Native people who grew up with that music, when they hear the blues, they hear Native music. And kind of the dominant blues scale, the major blues scale, which is the major pentatonic, it's a pentatonic scale with a flat 3, and that flat 3 is very much like where the blues takes off from just kind of a regular pentatonic scale. But that was a common scale throughout America and the native people, and it's backed up by like even looking at artifacts of their flutes. But it was also like a common scale throughout Africa as well. And Charlie Patton very much grew up, hearing powwow music, hearing the natives singing, but also hearing the powwow drum and the rhythms of that. And the powwow drum, like you mentioned, became outlawed. And it is widely accepted that the way that Charlie Patton beats on his guitar is very much in the same cadence with his vocalizing as the powwow drum is with powwow singing. And so you not only hear him singing in the same kind of scale that native people would sing in, but you'd also hear the rhythm of the powwow drum, which kind of informed the rhythm of the blues. So, everyone's going to debate who created the Delta blues. It's kind of a worthless debate because music is a conversation, and it comes from all sorts of places. But Charlie Patton is kind of seen as this seminal, like, no one will argue against anyone saying Charlie Patton was kind of the cornerstone of the Delta blues. And his growing up native and that music and that influence, while it came from a lot of places at that time, but it was very much as native as anywhere else. So, yeah.
Well, let's play a clip from you on Indigenous Peoples Day, kind of exemplifying this sound that you're talking about regarding Charlie Patton.
This is the Six Nations Women Singers. And this kind of represents the powwow drum and the instruments. And you could literally be killed, arrested, or have rations taken away from you if you perform this music. And so what Charlie Patton did was when he got to the guitar, playing this melodic scale that was also native, and singing these melodic scales that is very much reminiscent of the blues, he also beat on his guitar. And that beating of the guitar to native people is the same rhythm as the powwow drum, and he was using his guitar to replace this thing that was outlawed. So I'm going to play this, and I'm going to go into Charlie Patton just to show a musical example of this beautiful piece of history.
I'm talking with KEXP DJ Kevin Sur about the indigenous roots of many musical genres that we now know, jazz, blues, and now I want to talk to you about rock. So I feel like the first person that we should talk about who influenced rock and roll is Link Wray. Tell me more about Link Wray.
Link Wray was just... He is the coolest man to ever stand on a stage and play guitar. There's so many clips of him just so coolly playing the loudest through the loudest amp and just chewing gum and looking cool. But so Link Wray is Shawnee. He grew up in the Carolinas, and he was a prolific guitar player, but early on, he kind of developed his own style. And that style was very much informed by playing loud. And creating his own distortion. And what's funny is, like, if you think about rock and roll, if you any musicians out there think about rock and roll, the power chord is the most common thing, which allows anyone to just kind of like play chords. And Link Wray he created the power chord. And that's literally something that, like, if you ask any guitar player, punk, rock and roll, metal, whatever, it's like, what would you do without the power chord? It's kind of impossible to imagine. And that is really the coolest thing about, Link Wray from a technical standpoint. But from a stylistic standpoint, Rumble was his big first hit. And I believe it was like banned because it was like, even though it was an instrumental track, the powers that be thought it would incite like youth violence because it was so rebellious for the time. But like Iggy Pop tells a story about being in a cafeteria and that song coming on and him saying, "That is what I'm going to do. Whatever that is, that's what I want in my life." And there's similar stories from that. Basically, it's like, yeah, if it wasn't for Link Wray, MC5 wouldn't be a band who were kind of like the precursor to punk, but also Led Zeppelin, The Who, like all these incredible guitar-driven, like kind of aggravated guitar-driven bands, all link back to Link Wray and the influence that he had on them through this very accessible way of playing, which is rooted in the power chord, but rooted in just letting things play out long and loud and mean, and just letting that sound kind of soar. He was the first person to mix distortion and tremolo, a lot of those sounds. But, like I said, music's a conversation. Like, you can't discredit, like, rock and roll would not exist if it wasn't for Black people. But there's just certain aspects to that conversation that Link Wray played a major role in. And, those are just a couple of them. But he was just a very cool man. So, yeah.
So someone else I want to talk about that I didn't realize was Indigenous is Jesse Ed Davis, who I would know from his guitar solo in Jackson Browne's song, Doctor My Eyes.
Doctor My Eyes.
So he was apparently super influential to John Lennon, Aerosmith, Eric Clapton. Tell me more about Jesse Ed Davis.
Jesse was like the most sought after guitar player kind of his era. Like everyone in his generation, which I guess would be my dad's generation, just grew up in a very racist America. And he was Comanche, Muskogee, and Seminole. And he found his way through music. I know Taj Mahal was like a big reason why he rose to prominence. He helped co-write a lot of Taj Mahal's music.
I'm going back to Memphis, babe. Well, I have much better love.
But then he was kind of discovered by a lot of major rock stars from the UK and from Europe. And he was a heavy presence in anything that Rod Stewart did. John Lennon, George Harrison, like they all wanted Jesse Davis to play on their records or to help write songs for them. And he released a number of solo albums, but those first few records that he put out are just absolutely mind-blowingly good. And I play them all the time on Sound and Survivance. But he contributed to so many songs that, like you mentioned, Eric Clapton and like Jackson Browne. But he was so prolific in just being a presence in the studio, being present as a writer, for a good decade, that informed so many of the classic songs that we associate with rock and roll, that he helped shape that sound. That sound of the kind of mid to late 70s was very much him.
So another person I want to talk to that is near and dear to Seattle's heart is Jimi Hendrix. I didn't realize that his mom has Indigenous roots.
Yeah, and he was proud of it. And I think that he was someone that kind of through interviews, through his writing, through everything, was someone that was just trying to stay connected with his heritage and with his ancestors. And so he was unique in that he was outspoken about being Cherokee during his life. It's amazing, like the native guitar players alone that helped shape rock and roll. I mean, we talked about Link Wray, Jesse Davis, but Jimi Hendrix, I mean, it's all there. It's kind of like a huge, and Jimi Hendrix, if there was a monument to like the people who shaped it, I mean, he'd have to be on it.
All along the watchtower, preserves kept of you, while all the women came and went, barefoot servants too.
And I also didn't realize, too, that he was influential to Redbone. So I've known for a while that Redbone, an Indigenous band, they have their hit, Come and Get Your Love. I didn't realize that, I guess Jimi Hendrix had told Redbone, like, hey, embrace your Indigenous identity, you know, and they would go and perform like in regalia, which I thought was interesting that Jimi Hendrix was like, hey guys, embrace this.
Yeah, and that's why, like, he was, at the time, it was like I mentioned before, like that generation, everyone was hiding their identity out of safety. And you got to think about all the movies that were being made, the TV shows, everything was cowboys and Indians. And the Indians were like literally fed to the American public as these bad people that, you are supposed to kill. And for a long time, that was really the reality in so-called America. And so, that is generational trauma, and that is passed down, and that is unfortunately a byproduct of just trying to survive. So Jimi Hendrix, and we talked about Jesse Davis, Link Wray, and Link Wray, I don't even know how open he was about his heritage, but to wear it on one's sleeve, I think, Jimi Hendrix doing so and encouraging others to do it as well, that was very much new in rock and roll.
Yeah. So one more story that we probably should have mentioned when we were talking about Charlie Patton is an artist named Tal Moe. Can you tell that story?
This is just a fun story. It's someone needs to make it into a movie.
Yes.
But Tal Moe was a Samoan who moved to Hawaii, learned from the Hawaiians how to play Hawaiian steel guitar, and became one of the most famous Hawaiian players in the world. And he was constantly touring Europe. He actually inspired an entire subgenre of Indian music, not Indian as in America, but Indian as in India, which exists to today, where they use steel guitar as informed by Tal Moe. But kind of an interesting story was that Hitler was like one of his biggest fans. And so he's this Samoan guy playing Hawaiian music, learned from Hawaiians, and would go and play for the Third Reich. and he would go play for Hitler and he'd do all this stuff, to which it's like, that is awful. But the story is that he would do that, and he'd do that to smuggle. Initially, he would smuggle artifacts from Jews who had to seek asylum or left, or certain things that were left behind or stolen. So he would use this excuse to go toward Germany, and he would just bring a picture of him with Hitler with him everywhere he went, as a means to gain access to things and into places. And he started smuggling artifacts back for the Jewish community, and then eventually would start smuggling Jewish people back. And he would disguise them as members of his entourage and his band, and keep going back and playing and keep bringing people back. And it's a really cool untold story about a hero of World War II that fought in his own way to help save the lives of many Jewish people from Nazi Germany.
So, I mean, knowing all this history, and as you started gathering all this history in your mind, like, what does it make you reflect on just these genres as a whole, like knowing the Indigenous influence there?
There's a Hawaiian saying that a lot of Native people lean on. It's like, you need to know where you're from to know where you're going. And I think in terms of like this country and humanity, it's important to look at the painful sides of this, and it's important to know where everyone came from and respect where people came from. So when you see a person, you see their ancestors, you acknowledge how they've come to be there. And, the second I see a Native person thriving, that's what I see is someone who exists in spite of every attempt to erase their people from the world. And I think it's an important story that needs to be told. And like, we all know like so many different aspects of where music comes from. And like I said, music is a conversation. It comes from sound that's captured out of the air, influencing the ears of someone who then reinterprets it in their own way. And there's never like a monolithic thing on like this one person did this one thing or invented this. And I think the whole effort to try to say who invented what is kind of doesn't make sense in music. But I do think making sure that you don't exclude people from the conversation about where certain sounds came from is really important, because as you learn that, you really learn about, so many aspects of the history of this country, and its ugly parts. And you need to learn that so we know how to move forward. And I think just understanding who these musicians are, it lets you hear the powwow drum when you hear the Delta blues. It lets you hear that scale when you hear like any rock and roll that has that flat 3, and you're going to know, oh, this was heavily influenced by Native people, or the power chord. We had an interview with Ambigaze, who were an Anishinaabe band, where I had to like stop them in their tracks, because there was just a moment where they gave this little hint. And I talk with Native musicians all the time when they say, oh, I don't really play Native music. And I'm like, but you do. No one's educated that actually the positions of your hands right now are link ray. That's a Native person. Like the technique that you're using, or the country music you're singing with the slide steel guitar, that's Kanaka, that's Native Hawaiian. Like, this is all Native stuff. And so I think it also helps inform like a lot of musicians to take ownership that, oh yeah, like I am playing Native music. I'm not playing something that TV and whatnot would tell me came from folks that didn't look like me. And so I think it's just really important. I think it's just important to dive into those hurtful places to see the beauty that comes out of it, and to acknowledge that when you hear it.
Beautifully said. Well, I've been speaking with KEXP DJ Kevin Sur about the Indigenous influence in many genres of music, including jazz, rock and roll, and the blues. Thank you so much for sharing all this fascinating history with us.
Thanks for asking, and thanks for having me, Emily.
And that was A Deeper Listen. There are now 6 episodes left of this podcast. Next week, we'll hear from Radiolab host Jad Abumrad about his new podcast about the pioneer of Afrobeat, Fela Kuti. He'll talk about Fela Kuti's life, music, and legacy. We'll also hear from the first Aboriginal band to play Abbey Road Studios. They'll talk about their new album. We'll also hear from a former J-pop star that has turned into an amazing electronic DJ and producer. And we'll have many, many other stories, so please keep listening. Even though this feed is ending, I would love for you to leave a rating and review so this feed is just a little easier to find for the next person. And also, I just love a little bit of feedback. So send some love over, a rating, a review. It would mean the world. But most of all, thanks for taking a deeper listen.